Welcome back to another podcast episode. So I took a little bit of a break. A few things happened, which we'll get into today. But I'm back and I want to talk about those things and what I learned and just some triggers that I've been finding recently. Let's dig deep together and hopefully there's something insightful, something you can relate to, or just seeing the process I go through when I try and acknowledge a new trigger and try and fix it. Okay, I don't even know where to start. So, this time last year I lost my childhood dog Buddy, and I think I've spoken about that time in my life before on this channel, but it was really hard. It was a shock. He was perfectly healthy, he was only 9, should have lived a lot longer, and then straight away, randomly got cancer, and within a week he'd gone really downhill. This week, a year later, my puppy passed away to cancer as well. This one hit 10 times harder because he was a puppy, literally a baby, and I don't know how much I want to talk about it because I don't want to get upset, but the way I've reacted is kind of what I want to talk about, because it's not a nice thing to go through, not a nice thing to go through once, let alone twice, and not a nice thing to go through with such a young, innocent puppy. It was another shock in my life, and I feel like everything that I've been through that has been pretty deep has all come from shock, things that I never expected, rather than things I saw coming or things that gradually broke down and something happened. Everything I feel like has really impacted me has been completely taken me by surprise. In some ways that's a blessing. I feel like the shock kind of comes before any other of the emotions, and the other emotions in my personal experience are way more painful, and I do feel like shock sometimes absorbs a lot of that for you because you kind of just dissociate, but at some point you're going to have to deal with it, and I think with Buddy the shock absorbed all the painful emotions and I didn't ever really process that. So with it happening again with Cody, I think this time round, yes, I've still dealt with it very in a similar way, but it definitely all came out. Made me question my beliefs, made me question my thoughts, and kind of who's there for me, who's not, why me. It really sent me into a victim mindset, everything that I talk about on this podcast that you shouldn't. And it's been basically a very eye-opening time to be okay, what do you do in a crisis? Let's share more of most of the stuff I share has been after big traumatic events and healing gradually after. What do you do when something big happens again in the middle of your journey? Now, what might seem silly to some people is I'm talking about deaths of dogs, and you may have never had a pet, you may have had way more traumatic deaths of parents, people way closer to you. So this might not seem like this big. For me, losing a dog is really painful just because they are so innocent. They have no idea what was going on, and just their personality has such an impression on the household. It's unconditional love, and I did a little post on this, and it's of course, you feel, me and JC have spoke about this before, where it's unconditional love. It's actually very rare to find that in romantic relationships, because unconditional means you would still love them even under the condition that they wouldn't love you back. A dog to me was what I feel is the only person, the only thing that I felt that true unconditional love bond with. Someone that literally is a pet. They will always accept you for who you are because they can't see good and bad. They can just see that you look after them and they love that. So that bond is really important, knowing that they're going to love you no matter what. And to lose that bond is tough. When I lost Buddy, I did go into a state of shock. It was also smack bang around the time I was also going through a big breakup, and I just was in a complete fuck it mood. I got on with life. I didn't seek revenge, I didn't seek anger, but I also didn't seek sadness. I didn't necessarily cry at all around that time. If anything, I used to be quite an emotional person. That completely took the emotion out of me. And yeah, like I felt like I was in a state of dissociation, and like every day I was waiting for it to like hit me, and it was all going to come crashing down, and it never really did. And I spoke to a therapist, and she was kind of like, the thing is, you might just be able to deal with things a lot better than you thought. Maybe you're just getting on with life. And I had so much guilt with that when it comes to losing the dog, because I was like, I know I should be feeling more emotions at this time, but the only way for me to like get through that was to literally block it out and get on with life. And that's just how my brain now works. Eventually, once I'd got over the shock, I kind of realised that, you know, he'd been with me 9 years. Like, I was very grateful to have a childhood dog, and I could accept that eventually. Then I got a puppy, and he was, if anything, he had even more personality than my childhood dog. He was a golden retriever, so you probably know how friendly they are. Yeah, I had him for like 7 months or something, and no symptoms. Just all of a sudden took him in he started bleeding at the mouth a bit, so we took him in a couple of times to get that checked out. Then he went for a bit of a surgery for a clean-up, and next thing we know, he had cancer everywhere, pretty much. So a shock, and it was like a big shock, and yeah, hurt even more because he was so young. But luckily the way I kind of dealt with it is I did let myself cry this time. I found out at work, I pulled over, and I let myself just completely cry on the way home, because I just knew that I couldn't bottle it like I did with Buddy again. I feel like this episode is going to be a little bit of me venting and like treating you guys like my therapists, but I really want to show how I've taken two really horrendous things and I've really tried to turn it around, because it's a very hard thing, but I'm also not over it, and I'm also like still in a state of like, I want to be honest on this podcast and not always be like, this happened, I fixed it, life's perfect again. It's not. I'm getting through it, and I'm sharing that with you guys. I think with the Buddy thing, I could kind of view that as like, it did teach me something. It came at a time that I definitely needed to be alone. Like, I just had a breakup, and that breakup I had a very big anxious attachment to, so like was always reliant on that person's company. So when that was gone, I was then, you know, like, I hate being alone, I hate people leaving. Then I rely on my friends, and then if they were busy or something, it hit 10 times harder because it felt personal. It felt like everyone was abandoning me at that time. So then, you know, I'd just go on walks with my dog all the time. And then I genuinely do believe, like, God was like, now you're just relying on the dog. Like, you've got to learn that you need to be alone, even without an animal. It sounds crazy, but I genuinely believe that that's the lesson I had to learn. Honestly, that summer was so important for me, because I did have, like, I didn't have no one. I had my friends, of course, but I spent that summer mainly going on walks by myself without a dog, going to the gym, cooking, trying to get into new hobbies, taking myself on dates and cafes without a dog. Like, it felt so strange, but I'm so happy I did it. I didn't date, I didn't see anyone. I just really like tapped into that, finding comfort in my own company. Not everyone has to do that, because they might already feel comfortable, but if you hate being alone and you hate being in the house, especially at night and stuff, like, that's not something that you can just run away from, distract yourself, fill with other people, a pet. You've got to face that head on. And I did, and it was horrible, but oh my goodness, it changed my life. Like, I love being alone. I love being in this house. I love doing things by myself, to the point almost too much maybe. But it really taught me that I can do anything I want alone. And if anyone else wants to join me in these like little fun activities, then that's a bonus. So no one can ever make me feel like if they leave, I don't have any core foundations for the rest of my life. Like, if they leave, you take away my hobbies, or you take away my plans for the day. No, I still have it all. If you want to join, bonus. With Cody, I'm struggling to find a lesson in that. I'm struggling to find a reason why that needed to happen. And I'll be honest, it's bred a lot of anger, and I feel like it is a lot of built up anger of things I've been through in the last couple of years that I didn't face, and I never got closure on, I never got angry about. I just dealt with it, and now I do feel very angry, but like, I'm still really pushing this positive mindset I have of like, okay, let's just find some light in the darkness. Something horrible has happened, I'm angry, why? He was 8 months old, we already lost a dog, Why do other people get to have a golden and I can't, etc. It's all this anger, but realistically I have to find some string of hope. And for me, that's just the fact that I'm so grateful that I even got to have such a personality in my life, even only for like 8-7 months. He was just the most beautiful, funny character, and like nothing will top that, and that's okay. Like, again, it just reiterates what I always talk about on this podcast of, it's not necessarily, you can't hold on to people, you can't hold on to things, you just have to hold on to experiences and memories as a whole point of life. Of like, you're not always going to get to keep things, but you are going to get to keep the fact that I got to have a golden at some point. I got to experience and have really amazing memories of looking after this amazing puppy. Yes, it is horrible and sucks that I don't get to keep that, and I don't think that bit's fair, and I can't figure out what the meaning is behind that, and I don't think I need to. I don't think there is one. Some things, shit happens, do you know what I mean? That is the only way I can like stay sane in this situation. But the one thing I can take away is gratitude of like, okay, this life really is just about people coming in and people going in horrendous ways, but I've just got to really be at ease. It's hard, but I've got to be at ease with enjoying the moment as it is. I'm not going to get to keep anything. It's all temporary. And you just got to trust that like you'll be okay. Like, if you told me that this was going to happen, I'd feel like I would have broken, fallen to bits, not been able to get back up. But here I am, strong, getting on with it. You have to, and I'm a lot stronger than I thought, clearly, because this type of thing is not something that I would normally be able to deal with, and I just have had to do it. So it's just a test of resilience, of knowing that life is going to probably get worse. Like, there might be more horrible things that are going to happen. 100%, every one of us is going to lose a human at some point, and it's when you get there, it's going to be very hard to deal with, of course. But just holding on to any string of hope and any lesson, I guess, when this shit happens, is the only thing that gets me through. So I hope that that is some advice that works for other people. I feel like I've spoken to a lot of people, and you know, when lots and lots of bad things happen, obviously you're going to view the world differently, you're going to lose hope, you're going to get angry. These are all valid emotions, but at the end of the day, it's like you have the rest of your life to live, and you've got to choose things now. You've got to choose how you react. You can't control what happens, you can only choose how to react and how you want the rest of your life to go. You've got to let yourself be valid, let yourself be the victim for a bit, because you are, when bad things happen. Process it, go to therapy, do what you need to do, but at some point you're going to have to pick yourself up and realise you cannot like dwell in it forever, or you're going to just hate life and you're never going to see the positives again. Then what's the point? Do you know what I mean? And you've got to realise that you've got years ahead of you, and you're going to have to somehow find something you like to continue. But I saw a quote the other day. It was like, you can't choose, I think it was something like, you can't choose where you fall, but you can choose to stand back up, or something like that. And I think that was really important for me to hear, of like, it's out of my control what bad things happen. I could sit here all day and question why and how, but it's happened, and I've got to process it properly, of course, but at some point I'm going to have to stand up. Other things that I've kind of noticed, I think because I've been a bit emotional, and I've fallen in it. I'm in a sensitive, vulnerable state. I hate feeling vulnerable. I'm normally the strong person, and I'm the type of person that will mask 100%. You will never know if I'm upset if I'm around you, unless it's the end of the world, because I hate being that like Debbie Downer. I used to be such an attention seeker, so it really makes me cringe if I do it now. And I know that's not necessarily healthy. You can ask for help. You should ask for help. I have a podcast where I really urge you to do the right thing. But me personally, I'm not perfect, and I don't like doing it. I mask, I hide it. I have been in a very sensitive, vulnerable state, which means any little thing I'm finding a lot harder than I normally would. And I've had quite a lot of, like, as I call them, episodes of like freaking out, having a meltdown, having a breakdown over things that shouldn't normally send me into that state. And it's definitely because I'm more emotional, and that's fine. Like, I've got to look after myself. I've fallen. You can't just assume that you're going to be fine after a bad thing. You've got to look after yourself. But what's really interesting is I've like done my analysis of like, that really pissed me off. Why? Where does it come from? How are we going to fix it? This whole analysis that I always talk about really interests me, and I find it annoying when I don't have something to analyse. So it's annoying because normally that's the time that you're most peaceful in your healing journey, when you genuinely have nothing to stress about or like analyse. But I find it super interesting and I like learning about myself. So I actually kind of enjoy triggers now. Put myself out there with like meeting new people, new friends, new challenges, because I'm guaranteed to find more triggers amongst that will teach me more. And I'd rather learn, not quicker, I'm not trying to pressure myself, but I want to learn as much as possible, so I'm my true self. I know exactly what I can offer and what I need, and I know I have so much more to learn, so I welcome it in that sense. But I found that like I really can't deal with plans like changing. I'd say I'm quite spontaneous. I like lots of fun different plans, but when there's an already solid plan in place, when that changes, I get so freaked out, and I didn't know where it came from. And I was like, whenever like the plan, like times change drastically, or I'm not hearing from people, or like something gets cancelled like pretty, once you're ready, that really pisses me off. Like, it hurts, it upsets me, and it gives me anxiety, and I'm really shook up and like in a bit of a rage after. And the one thing I've learned is to never take it out on people in the moment, because you're gonna cringe at yourself in the morning. So I always write any little rage, anger or anxiety note in my notes app. Then I turn my phone off and I fuck off for a few hours, go on a walk or gym and do whatever I need to do to calm myself down. Then the next day I'll read it and literally cringe and be like, it was not that deep at all and it's no one's fault. And I was like, right, I need to get to the bottom of this. What is this? And it's just so interesting, because it's like, I really look at my upbringing, and my mum had quite bad anxiety growing up, so it was quite a thing to always tell her what my plans were, very much on the tee, like pretty, and that definitely created some anxiety in me. And then going to school and friends kind of being mean in the sense of telling you one thing and then changing it and not letting you know, like that gave me anxiety. And there's just a lot of things I look at in my childhood that induce anxiety based on the topic of like plans and times changing, or me being late and getting in loads of trouble for it. Like, these are all things that were very prominent in my childhood. So now I hate it. Like, I will hardly ever be late. I find it so scary when I'm like late, and I get really angry when other people are late, and it's like something I'm having to deal with at the moment. So it's the table of thought bias. So there's different thought biases. One is mind reading. I'm going to put a screenshot, but one's mind reading, and it's basically making assumptions about what others are thinking and feeling. So an example is like, he hasn't called me in a while because he hates me. And it's like, you just assume that's what they're thinking. They're probably not, they're probably just busy. And I'm definitely like, was guilty of that in my last relationship, of just assuming that they were doing something, or they hated me, or they were in a mood with me. And I still do it now. Like, I feel if I get the wrong tone from someone, I just assume like it's something I've done and they're annoyed at me, rather than being logical and thinking it could be anything. There's overgeneralization, which is taking one event and using it to generalize about other things. So, example, I failed my exams, my future's ruined. This is something that is very, very common. I see, like, if someone fails something, they just feel like they're not good enough and they won't try again. If they fall down, they won't get back up, kind of what I was saying earlier. And also it can happen in friendships and relationships. Like, if you used to do something that was quite, like, the other person found quite hard, and then you argue about something else, they might bring that back up to throw in your face. And that's not fair if you've forgiven and got over it, because it's like, how are you going to bring something up from my past that we've dealt with? But where that does happen, and like kind of I do as well, is where like that thing was never had closure and was never proven better. Like, if you said, I don't like when you do this, can you like not? And then there's no progress after that to like bed that situation, you're obviously going to bring it back up. Egocentric thinking, assuming that others have the same perspective and values as we have and judging their behaviours through that lens. So this is exactly what I'm talking about. Example, I would never be late like that. He obviously doesn't care enough about me. This is me to a T, and it's something I'm really struggling with. I hate when people will do or won't do things that I would, like I would never be late. And if someone is taking the piss like 30 minutes, an hour late, I genuinely think it's like a personal attack. I'm like, but I would never do that, so why have you? Or like, when it comes to effort with friendships, I've been really struggling of like, but I would never do that, or I would always offer this, why won't you? And I take it as like personal, like you're just choosing not to do it for me. And that's clearly wrong and something I'm working on, but it's very interesting when it's in a table like this and you read it out loud. The other two, just to read out because it's interesting: emotional reasoning. I feel it, therefore it must be true. I feel guilty, therefore I'm a bad parent. This is true as well. I don't feel like I feel like this, but you know, like a lot of people might feel a certain type of way about them. Like, they're like, I feel fat, so I must be fat. And a lot of the time it's not. A lot of the time it's just a mindset, and I feel ugly, so I must be ugly. Of course not. It's a mindset. You cannot believe everything you think. And this is something I did a post on ages ago. It's like, I no longer believe everything my brain tells me. I had the maddest anxiety a few years ago, and I would believe every single anxious thought my brain would tell me. And I got myself into a right pickle about it. Even about my self-worth, everything. There is no point believing your brain, because half of the time it's actually out to get you. So you just got to really leave that one out. The last one is musts and shoulds. Relentlessness and unrealistic expectations that set us up to feel like a failure every day. I must always look perfect. I should never do any less than my absolute best. I feel like I've seen this quite a lot with my new friends recently, of just like kind of them setting themselves unrealistic goals, and if they don't reach it, they feel like a failure. And that's really hard, because like in this society of like dealing with so many fast-paced, you know, people becoming millionaires, people becoming successful, traveling, everything, it's like a race and to the end. And what people forget is everyone's journey is different. No matter like how fast or hard you work, if your journey's planned out differently to someone else's, you're gonna have a different ending. Like, this is something that I truly believe in, is I genuinely know that I already have my life mapped out for me. I have free will, of course, and I'm going to work as hard as I can to achieve certain goals, but my ultimate goal of the reason I've been put on this earth is already mapped out for me, and no matter what path I choose, it will lead me to that thing. So you need to put less pressure on yourselves for that, as long as you're working hard and doing everything you can to, you know, work towards your goals, but mainly make yourself happy and enjoy each day. There is nothing more you can do. Setting yourself really high expectations is only going to breed more disappointment, and that can like really dig at your self-worth, and then you end up just giving up and feeling like you can't achieve those goals when you 100% can. It's just there's no race. It can take people years. Some people have changed career paths like 6-7 times before they've become successful in the eyes they wanted, and everyone's journey is different. You know, you might get an easy road, you might get a really hard road. You cannot compare to anyone. Do not do that. But yeah, I just feel like that table kind of sums up majority of all my different friends' different thinking. I've probably got like 2 out of 5 there that I definitely do. But yeah, the one I really struggle with is egocentric thinking, of just assuming that others have the same values as me when they don't. And it's something I struggle with, because I always talk about aligning with people. Like, part of me has dealt with so many people that I feel like have taken the piss and not met my my boundaries, my expectations, because they're just a shit person, not because they have different values. They just have blatantly gone against mine after I've communicated them. And I've dealt with so many different people like that honestly I just can't be arsed for it anymore. And I try not to shut people out, but I am a lot more picky with who I let in my inner circle now because of that. And it's difficult because I always want to pick people that really align with me, and in that thinking of like, I want to pick people that align with you, that means that you share the same values and morals as me. But a lot of the people that you might be starting to nitpick do actually share a lot with you. It's just they might be a bit low in some other areas. And if you really analyse it, you realise it's all because they have a different upbringing to you. You know, not like someone that lives with like 7 sisters and brothers and a massive family versus someone that's an only child who lived in a completely different area or house. There's no way they're going to have the same values and morals, but those people could potentially be friends. But sometimes it's way too different where you don't get each other, you're never gonna, so you won't align and you shouldn't be friends, and it's only going to cause more arguments. So this is where you have to be very careful about, okay, who do you kind of keep at arm's length, who do you cut off because they completely don't align with you, and who doesn't really align with you but genuinely is a good friend and like does get on with you, does get you, just not in every single way. And it's hard, you can't 100% match with someone, you know, there's always going to be flaws, and that's the whole point of friendships, relationships, is you'll accept them for good parts and bad parts because you have them yourself too. So it's something I struggle with, of like, well, I take it personally because I wouldn't have done that, but it's like there's so many other things that they have done that you might not have, or vice versa. So you just have to keep an eye and also really dig deep on like, why does that trigger you? And I think for me it's my upbringing and all the way I've been brought up, and I do take it personally. And where I feel like I'm struggling is like, I've done a pretty good job of finding self-love, like putting myself first, but there's a few tests where like I do still sacrifice myself for others. You know, if I start for friends, for new people, if I really want to like impress or do something, I naturally slip. And that's definitely like the ego chasing that, wanting to be a priority, wanted to be wanted. So I'm still not there yet, clearly, but it's very interesting to dissect. And it really comes out with plans of like, if they're going to cancel on me, I'm like, why am I not your priority? And it's like, as much as like you need to communicate your boundaries of like, this makes me anxious, you also shouldn't expect everything to always go right based on you. So, you know, give and take a little bit. Yeah, I feel like this is just like a bit of a rant about my life, I guess. I just thought I had some interesting things to share today, and see if you relate to any of it, and even just understanding the cycle of like, what type of thinking do you have, where does that come from, how are we going to fix it, and that's exactly what they'll do in psychodynamic therapy, is go through your whole life of like, what have you been through and how does that affect you in adult day today. But yeah, bit of a ranty episode, but I haven't done one in a while and I just needed to sit down and talk, I think. But we'll get back on a bit more of a structured routine soon.